presence of a new curator at the Spencer Museum is an enormous change for the museum, and especially a full-time curator of Asian art. So I think the expectations for you are quite high here, and I'm wondering if you would share with us some of your hopes and expectations for the work.
Well, I'm really excited to be here. When I came for my interview initially, I was really impressed with the feeling that I got from the Spencer and from the entire KU community. And I'm really excited to bring an expanded role for Asian art here, especially for both modern and contemporary, which I think has become a very exciting part of the developments in East Asian art especially, but also bringing those contemporary artists into play with our collections of historical art. So drawing on a rather rich university collection, and I've always thrived in university museums because we tend to do much more, sometimes risky, but also extremely intellectual explorations of questions related to art. So.
And you mentioned the idea of risk, and so I'll just ask you this as a curator: what kind of risks do you really like to take?
I like posing more questions than answers. Creating juxtapositions in the gallery that I hope don't need a lot of didactic explanation, but evoke a new way of understanding the art. That's one way. But then also sort of breaking the entire idea of Asia is here, the West is here, and bringing it all together in a much more interesting dialogue with each other. And then also dealing with some really hard-hitting issues that I think are very important, and not always sort of posing the answer or the solution, but just trying to bring awareness to the issue at hand.
You mean raising issues in a museum and not neatly packaging it up?
Right.
You know, and I think some of the critique about that point of view, which I share, is that people may walk into an exhibition and leave saying to themselves, "I don't know what to think." Is that all right with you?
That's fine with me, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's because it's not always. For so long, it was the curator's job to tell people what to think about art, and I don't feel that is an appropriate role anymore. There should be a much more of a dialogue between the curatorial sort of editing of art and presentation, and also then the audience response to it. It's not to say that there aren't rights and wrongs to be done within that, and that everything is relative, but I think that there is much more flexibility for creating interesting engagements between different audiences and different intellectual practices within the museum.
You allude to a shifting role for the curator, that the curator is somehow shifting role inside the museum, and I would suggest that the role of a museum is also shifting from being dispensing knowledge, holding objects as repositories, and becoming much more interactive, but much more open.
Right. Well, this has become a very interesting critique of the museum from such thinkers as Foucault, who pose it as a repository of power, and presentation of culture becomes sort of a paradigm of power. How do we then critique that or break that? And I think it goes really back to the heart of what a museum is, as a place to muse, as a place of engagement and wonder, and as we talked about yesterday, poetry. And I think we need more of that in our contemporary life.
Well, I'm interested that you're saying this poetry, because it would be such a wonderful thing if people began to think of the Spencer Museum as a place that glows with the poetic impulse. And I think bringing artists into that is also part of that.
Oh, very much so. And I'm really looking forward to more opportunities to bring artists here, and also to create more interesting dialogue between issues that are really relevant to KU and to Kansas and Lawrence, and also then how those issues then relate to things that are of relevance internationally and globally.
So, in your view, these two things are not at odds,
No.
whether a museum is about its local community or whether it's about global issues.
The local is the global, I
Yeah.
think, and that was one interesting issue for me coming here from Beijing. A friend of mine said to me, well, I guess in this day and age it doesn't really matter where you live because everything's connected.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I feel about it.
I'm curious how you think about the Museum of the Future. Let's think of the Spencer Museum in 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 20. What does it look like then?
Well, hopefully it's not the sort of taxonomic regime of going through and I think stalely presenting a very scholastic idea of what art should be, but it is a much more inviting place. How is that achieved? I think new media. I think that this coming generation, I was probably the beginning of that, really understanding how media, especially like television and film and digital art, computers and new technologies, how they play into the creation of art now. But then also as a repository for traditions, and for reevaluating those traditions and how they have relevance to our lives. And also then the expanded social role of the museum as not just a place for putting pictures on the wall or some sculptures and cases, but as a nexus for an entire community like Lawrence, for where people can come and enjoy programs, interact with artists, see films. I think of the Center for Contemporary Art in London, where this is a place that artists, they come and they join in membership, and there's avant-garde theater, and there's all of these social interactions that happen there, and I would like, hopefully, for the Spencer to become more of that.